Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the quiet like the only thing that mattered. A tone low, steady, threaded with something she wasn't quite willing to name. I looked at her across the small table, the soft lamplight holding us in a kind of bubble. She was older, yes, mid-40s, lines around her mouth from years of smiling and maybe a few years of not, but there was nothing tired about her. Every detail about her drew me in. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and then immediately let it fall loose again. The curve of her wrist as she held her glass. The way her eyes stayed on mine too long, then dropped, as if checking herself. She had no idea how much I noticed. Or maybe she did. The space between us was heavy, like silence wasn't absence but pressure. My hand rested on the table. Hers hovered near. She didn't touch me, not yet, but the possibility made my skin burn. I tried to say something light, something that wouldn't betray the pulse hammering in my throat. Instead, I said nothing. I just let the moment stretch. Her smile was small, almost secret. "You're quiet tonight," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that made my stomach tighten. "Maybe I'm listening," I answered. "To what?" she asked. I hesitated, then lifted my gaze fully into hers. "To you." Her fingers brushed the rim of her glass, slow, thoughtful. A pause. Then, deliberately, her hand shifted, just enough for her fingertips to graze the back of mine. Barely a touch, but it jolted through me like heat. The air seemed to thin. I should have pulled back. Instead, I leaned in just slightly, enough that I could see the faint tremble at the corner of her lip, the way her breath caught before she exhaled. She wasn't untouchable. She wasn't some flawless statue. She was human, and the nearness of her felt like gravity. "You make it hard to think," I murmured. That earned me a glance sharp enough to cut, softened a second later by something almost tender. Her mouth curved into the faintest smile, though it wasn't playful. It was closer to confession. "I want you everywhere," she whispered, almost like she regretted saying it the moment it left her. My heart stumbled. Heat surged. She had no idea what that did to me. I let the silence sit, heavy, deliberate. My voice, when it came, was lower than I meant it to be. "Then tell me where first." Her eyes widened, just a fraction. She wasn't expecting me to meet her there, not so directly. Her throat moved as she swallowed, her hand still against mine, not pulling away. The room felt too small now. Too quiet. The lamp hummed faintly. I could hear the shift of fabric as she crossed her legs, the delicate brush of her heel against the floor. Every sound was amplified, every second longer than it should have been. For a moment it was just us, her hand on mine, our breath tangled in the space between. And then, the front door clicked. A sound sharp and ordinary, but it sliced through the tension like cold air. Her head turned toward the hallway. She froze, hands still touching mine. I didn't move. Neither of us breathed. The door opened. The sound of the door opening faded as quickly as it came, just a neighbor, passing through the shared hallway. Nothing more. But the spell had been broken, and she pulled her hand back as if the touch had burned her. I almost said something to bring it back, to name what had just passed between us, but she was already leaning into her chair, smoothing her skirt as though every crease suddenly mattered. The distance hurt more than it should have. You shouldn't say things like that," she murmured after a pause, her eyes fixed on the stem of her glass. "Why not?" I asked too quickly. My voice sounded younger than I wanted it to. She gave me a look, sharp, then soft again, like she was trying to balance honesty with restraint. "Because it's easy to forget myself with you. And I can't afford that." Her words lingered. I wanted to ask what forgetting herself meant, but I stayed quiet, waiting. Finally, she sighed, almost laughing at herself. "I've spent years being careful. Raising kids, ending a marriage that had ended long before the papers were signed, building something steady out of what was left. Careful became a habit." Her fingers traced the condensation on her glass, absently. "You make careful feel impossible." Her confession hit me harder than I expected. She wasn't untouchable, she was lonely. Not in a desperate way, but in a way that had shaped her, like the lines on her face. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. Maybe careful isn't what you need anymore. She blinked at me, caught off guard. Then she smiled, small and bittersweet. And what do you know about what I need? I wanted to answer. God, I wanted to tell her I knew more than she thought. How I'd noticed the way she paused before speaking, like words cost her more than they used to. How I caught the faint perfume that lingered on her cardigan, the scent carrying me long after she left the room. How every time her hand brushed mine, I replayed it like a secret. But I said none of that. I just shrugged. I noticed things. That made her laugh, quietly. A laugh that dropped her guard for a second. The air between us shifted again. She leaned forward this time, her shoulder brushing mine as she reached across to gather the empty plate. The touch was small, nothing meant by it, but her warmth stayed even after she pulled back. I swallowed hard, trying not to let it show. You shouldn't look at me like that, she said suddenly, still not meeting my eyes. Like what? Her lips curved. Like you've already decided. She stood then, gathering the dishes, giving herself an excuse to move. But when she passed behind me, her hand lingered just a moment on my shoulder, too light to be accidental, too long to be casual. I closed my eyes at the contact, a silent admission to myself. I couldn't stop. When I looked up, she was at the sink, pretending to be busy. But she hadn't pulled her hand away quickly enough, and we both knew it. The night stretched longer than either of us admitted. Dishes rinsed, glasses cleared, but neither of us moved toward goodbye. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely, but her eyes kept sliding back to me. Every time they did, I felt younger and older than I was, caught somewhere between wanting to prove myself and wanting only to stay in her gravity. The quiet pressed in again, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. You should probably go, she said finally, but the way she said it wasn't final. It trembled, like she wasn't convinced herself. I stepped closer, not enough to touch, but close enough to see the faint pulse at her throat. Do you want me to? Her breath caught. She looked away, then back. That's not the point. The silence after that was thick, every beat of it charged. My hand hovered at my side, itching to reach for her. She shifted, the movement small but pulling her closer to me, as if her body betrayed what her words refused. Then, her phone buzzed on the counter. Loud in the silence. She startled, snatching it up, her face tightening as she read the screen. I caught only a glimpse of the name, Anna. Her daughter. She set the phone down quickly, face composed again, but I had seen the flicker of guilt before she buried it. You see why this is? She gestured vaguely, as though the word itself was too dangerous to say. Complicated, I offered. Her lips pressed together. More than that. The space between us narrowed again anyway. Either of us stepped back. My hand lifted before I could stop myself, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. She closed her eyes, just for a second, as if giving in to the touch. When she opened them, she was too close. Our breaths tangled. The faintest tilt of her head would have brought her lips to mine. I froze. So did she. Don't, she whispered, though her body leaned forward as she said it. I wasn't. Her laugh cut me off, shaky, breathless. You were. The tension snapped tighter. My hand was still near her face, her shoulder barely brushing my chest. I could smell her perfume, faint vanilla threaded with something warmer. Do you know what people would say? She asked, voice low. You're barely older than what? I pressed, desperate, my voice rougher than I meant. She didn't answer. Her silence was the answer. Seconds dragged. Then, in a movement that surprised us both, she stepped forward instead of away. Her hand touched my chest, fingers splayed, trembling just slightly. Not pulling me closer, just resting there, as if to test how far she would allow herself. I didn't breathe. Neither did she. We didn't kiss. But we stood so close it hardly mattered. And neither of us pulled away. Her hand was still on my chest. Light, hesitant, but real. I could feel the weight of it more than I should have, every fingertip a warning and an invitation. "You need to stop looking at me like that," she whispered. "I can't." The words slipped out before I had a chance to swallow them. Her eyes snapped to mine, wide, searching. The space between us vibrated, as though silence itself was holding us hostage. She shook her head, as if to break the spell, but didn't move away. "You don't understand what this would cost me," she said. "Then explain it." I pressed, voice low, steadying myself against the tremor in her tone. She let out a laugh, quiet and brittle. "My daughter, my friends, the whispers." "I'd be reckless, foolish. You'd be exactly where I want to be." I cut in, sharper than I meant. Her breath hitched. My hand rose almost without thought, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The texture was soft against my fingers, lingering longer than it should. She closed her eyes at the touch, leaning, barely, into my hand. When her eyes opened again, there was no retreat in them. Only fire and fear, tangled together. "You make me feel 20 again," she said, voice trembling. "And that terrifies me." I stepped closer, so close I could feel the warmth radiating from her, the faint catch of her breath against my neck. "And you make me forget I'm 20 at all." Her lips parted. She drew in a slow breath, as though steadying herself against the pull. My hand slid to her shoulder, down her arm, stopping just before her wrist. I could feel the tremor there, not just hers but mine too. "You shouldn't say it," I whispered, leaning closer so my mouth was just at her ear. "Tell me to stop, and I will." She didn't say it. Instead, her hand, the one on my chest, fisted lightly in my shirt, pulling me closer by a fraction. The sound of it, the fabric tightening, her breath shivering against me, was louder than anything else in the room. "You don't know what you're doing to me," she said, a confession disguised as protest. "Then show me," I murmured back. For a heartbeat, we stood on the edge, her forehead almost brushing mine, her lips so close I could taste the faint sweetness of her wine on the air. My pulse thundered. Every muscle ached with the strain of waiting. And then, she drew back half an inch, her gaze darting to the door, as if remembering the world outside these walls. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her hands still gripping my shirt. "We can't," she said, but the words lacked conviction. "Then why are you still holding me?" I whispered. Her silence was the loudest answer of all. The moment hung, unbearable, unstoppable, and then the sound of a key rattled at the front door. The sound of the key in the lock froze us both. She released my shirt so quickly it felt like a wound. I stepped back, forcing space between us, though my pulse was still hammering from how close we'd been. The door opened. But no one entered. Just the metallic scrape of the key failing to turn all the way before it slid back out. A neighbor again. Harmless. Still, the spell was shattered. She turned from me, pressing her hand to the counter as if to ground herself. Her shoulders rose and fell too quickly, her breath still uneven. I wanted to reach for her, to say something to bridge the gulf, but she spoke first. "I shouldn't have let it get this far," she whispered. "You didn't let anything," I said. "We both." She spun on me, sharp, eyes blazing in a way I hadn't seen before. "Don't you dare say we both. You're young. You'll walk away from this untouched. I'll be the one branded foolish, reckless, weak." Her words cut deeper than she meant. But then, almost immediately, her face faltered, guilt flooding in. "I didn't mean yes, you did," I said quietly. The silence that followed was brutal. She gripped the counter harder, her knuckles white. Then she exhaled, shaking her head. "You don't understand. I've already been whispered about once. Years ago. After the divorce. People said I moved on too fast, that I let someone, too young, into my life." I blinked, the air leaving me. "You mean, this isn't the first time?" Her eyes closed, as if the admission itself was too heavy. "It ended badly. For him. For me. And I swore I wouldn't." Her voice cracked. "I wouldn't repeat it." The ground shifted beneath me. What had felt new, dangerous, intoxicating, suddenly felt like a door I wasn't supposed to open. But the revelation didn't make me want her less. It made me want her more. I stepped closer despite myself. She flinched, then stilled, her breath sharp as I brushed past her to set down my glass. Our arms touched barely, but the contact jolted like electricity. "I'm not him," I said softly. Her eyes opened, wide, wet at the edges. "And you're not the woman you were then." The truth of it lingered, thick and undeniable. Her hand trembled as it lifted, hovering just an inch from my chest, as though she wanted to touch but couldn't afford the risk. We stood locked in that fragile distance, her fear, my certainty, until finally her fingers closed the space, resting against me once more. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't words. But it was a decision. "I can't promise you won't regret me," she whispered, her lips trembling inches from mine. "Then regret me tomorrow," I murmured, leaning in. "Not tonight." Her breath shivered across my mouth, her body trembling against mine, caught between flight and surrender. The inevitable had never felt so close. Her hand still rested on my chest, trembling against the steady drum of my heartbeat. We were so close the world seemed to narrow to just the inch of space between our lips. The kitchen light hummed overhead. Outside, the night pressed against the windows. Inside, there was only us, breathing the same air, holding ourselves still as if movement would set everything ablaze. "You don't know how dangerous this is," she whispered, her voice so quiet I had to lean closer to hear. "Maybe I do," I said, my words brushing her mouth. Her fingers curled slightly into my shirt, the tiniest clutch, like she was pulling me nearer while begging herself to let go. "If I let this happen," she said, "there's no taking it back." "Then don't take it back," I murmured. "Let it happen." Her eyes searched mine, desperate, conflicted. For a heartbeat, she looked like she might run. Then, slowly, she leaned in until her forehead touched mine. The contact was small, almost innocent, but it shook me harder than anything else. Her skin warm, her breath uneven, the fragile surrender of her weight against me. It was all I needed to know she was breaking too. I lifted a hand, cupping her cheek. She closed her eyes at the touch, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath for years. My thumb traced the faint line at the corner of her mouth, the one that appeared when she tried not to smile. "You make me reckless," she whispered. "You make me real," I answered. Her laugh was wet, almost a sob, and then her lips brushed mine. Not a kiss, just a graze, testing, hesitant. It was enough to unravel me. I leaned in, closing the sliver of distance, and our mouths finally met. Soft at first, uncertain, then deepening with the hunger of everything we'd been holding back. Her hand slid up to my neck, tightening as though afraid I might disappear. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her closer, feeling the tremor in her body match the one in mine. The kiss wasn't neat. It was messy, raw, filled with the clash of hesitation and desire. She pulled back for a breath, eyes darting over my face, then kissed me again like she couldn't stop herself. "I shouldn't," she whispered against my mouth. "Then don't stop," I whispered back. And she didn't. The kitchen blurred, the counter, the lamplight, the clock ticking somewhere out of sight. All I knew was her warmth pressed against me, her breath breaking between kisses, the way her lips trembled but refused to leave mine. When she finally pulled back, resting her forehead to mine again, her chest rising fast, her voice was raw. "I can't promise you forever," she said. I held her tighter, steadying her trembling. "Then just promise me tonight." Her silence wasn't refusal. It was consent, the clearest answer she could give. For the first time, there was no space left between us. The house had gone still again. The refrigerator hum, the clock ticking on the wall, even the night air pressing at the windows, all of it faded into the background. She was still in my arms, forehead resting against mine, her breath uneven but softer now, calmer. For the first time, she didn't try to step back. "I feel foolish," she murmured, her words small but real. I smiled faintly, brushing my thumb along her cheek. Then we can be foolish together. Her eyes lifted, shining with something that looked dangerously close to relief. She laughed, quiet, shaky, but genuine. It sounded like a sound she hadn't made in a long time. You don't understand, she said. People will talk. They'll think I'm chasing something I shouldn't. I shook my head, holding her closer. Let them think what they want. They don't get to see this. They don't get to feel what I feel right now. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she leaned into me, her face pressing against my neck. The warmth of her skin, the slight tremor still in her body, it was more intimate than any kiss. We stayed like that for a long moment. No urgency now. Just stillness. When she finally pulled back, she didn't let go. Her hand slipped down my arm until our fingers laced together, her grip tight, certain. I don't know what this will look like tomorrow, she admitted. Neither do I said honestly. But I know what it looks like tonight. And I held up our joined hands. Her smile then, small, soft, unguarded, was worth every silence, every hesitation, every nearly broken moment. She leaned in, pressing her lips not to my mouth this time, but to my forehead. The kiss lingered there, warm and steady, a promise without words. I closed my eyes, letting the quiet settle around us. The doubts, the fears, the whispers, they would come. But not now. Not here. Tonight belonged to us, and that was enough. She sank down onto the couch, tugging me with her, our hands still joined. We sat close, shoulders pressed together, either of us needing to speak. The lamplight painted us in soft gold, her head leaning against my shoulder, our breaths falling into the same rhythm. For the first time, there was no fight left between want and restraint. No running, no denying. Just her beside me. Just me beside her. And in the quiet, I finally understood, whatever tomorrow brought, tonight had already changed us both. We weren't careful anymore. We weren't afraid. We were here. Together.